Hello, and welcome to another edition of Cracking the Cryptic. I mentioned on yesterday's video that I was going to try and take a look at the Deadly Killer Sudoku that appeared in Saturday's edition of the Times, and here it is on screen. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. It should be quite an interesting week for Sudoku, this one. There's a big anniversary in the Times newspaper for, I can't remember what number puzzle it is, some astronomical number of Sudokus they've published, might be 10,000. And I know they're planning on releasing some very difficult special puzzles on Wednesday, so take a look out, or keep a look out for those, and I'm sure that we'll try and cover how to solve them in future videos. Let's have a look at this killer now. The first thing to remember about killer Sudokus is the importance of the number 45. 45 is absolutely critical because every row, every column, and every 3x3 box in a killer Sudoku, or in any Sudoku in fact, will add to 45 because it will contain the numbers from 1 to 9 exactly once each. And we can use that principle to get a few early digits by the looks of this. So for example, we can fill in the value of this square here immediately. And the way to do that is to realize that we have this 19 cage, this 7 cage, and this 15 cage here, all entirely contained within this 3x3 box. Now if we add 19 to 7, we get 26, plus 15 is 41. So we know that this square here has to be a 4 in order to ensure that the box overall adds up to 45. Now if this is a 4, this one here has to be a 5. And in fact, if we look at row 9 of the grid here, we can use the same 45 principle again. We have this 18 cage, plus 9 is 27, plus 15 is 42. So we know that this square here must be a 3 in order to ensure that the row adds up to 45. What else can I see here quickly? Well, one thing to note is that here we have a 12 cage and a 17 cage, both 2 cells in size and in the same row. Now if we add 12 to 17, we get 29, and 29 is an interesting number. For those of you who solved Kukuru, you'll be very familiar with the number 29 in 4 cells. The reason it's interesting, it can only be made in one way, and that's with a 5, a 7, an 8 and a 9. So we know that because these digits all have to be distinct, they all have to be different, these 4 cells must be in some order 5, 7, 8 and 9. Well, quite clearly that's only possible in one way, and that's if 8, 9, 8, 9, 5, 7, 5, 7, and can we use that to make any more progress? Not immediately, or not so as I'm seeing it. But let's look at the central column of the grid now. We have a 15, a 9, and a 19 cage, again all entirely contained within this column. 15 plus 9 is 24, plus 19 is 43, so this square here has to be a 2. Oh, has to be a big 2. Let's fill that in. Okay, where now? I suppose an obvious place to look is this. Again, we've got a 17 square here in 2, which has to be 8 and a 9, and that interacts a little bit here with this 13 cage. The 13 cage, if we're not using an 8 or a 9, well, that can only be made from a 6 and a 7. So we can fill those 2 in. Therefore we know that the rest of the numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 in some order. And this square here can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's not going to be terribly helpful, I don't think. We can rule the 3 out from that because we can't have a 5 here. But the rest of it's all possible. So 7, 6 and 3 into this square. In fact, the only other thing to note is this can't be a 1 here because we have an 8 cage in 3 cells in the centre of this block here. Now everyone who's a regular at solving killer Sudoku will know that an 8 cage must contain a 1, because it'll either be a 1, 2, 5 or a 1, 3, 4 combination. So we can remove the 1 from this as well, and therefore the 7 from here. And now we can limit very heavily the value of this cell. We know that we know these 5 cells, if you like, that are untaken sum to 15, and we know this 8 is accounting for 3 of them. So we know this cell and this cell have got to sum up to 7. Now this is 2 or a 5, so in fact this will have to be 2 or 5 as well. And this will be a 1, 3, 4 variation of the 8 cage. Let's put that in. Like that. This 7 cage is now interesting in 2 cells. Why do I say that? Well, it's the importance of this 2, 5 here. This 2, 5 rules out the variation of 7 that's 2 and 5 into these 2 cells. Obviously, we can't have 3 lots of 2 and 5 in the same column of the grid. But this 4 here has already ruled out 3 and 4 from these 2 cells. So in fact, there's only one way now this 7 cell can work. 7 cage can work, and that's if it's going to be 1 and 6. And that's more important than you might think as well, in the sense that this 15 square now cannot be 6 and 9. It's got to be 7 and 8, and if we interact that with the 8 and 9 here, in fact that means this has to be an 8 and this has to be a 7. Might be able to use this 2, 5 again actually. Let's look at how that interacts with this top 3 by 3 box here. This is a 5. These 3 cells here will have to sum up to 10 in order to make sure the 15 cage works. If this is 10 plus 18 is 28, that would mean these 2 cells here have to be 8 and 9, which is possible. And if this is 2, these will have to be 13 plus 18 is 31. They'll have to add up to 14, which is also possible. But the interesting thing about that is either way round, neither of these cells can contain a 1, quite clearly. And yet we have a 1 here, and a 1 in these cells here. So we know there is a 1 in one of these 3 cells. And in fact, therefore, it's going to have to be in this particular cell here. That's the only place a 1 will go. And we can use simple Sudoku rules as well. We've got an 8 here and an 8 in one of these 2 cells. So we know one of these 2 cells has to be an 8. So now we actually are able to resolve this. I'll explain why. Because we worked out these 2 cells could add to 17, in which case the other cell would be a 9, like this. Oh, sorry about this, software's glitching. So 8, 9 was one possibility. The other way round we did it, we said these 2 had to add to 14. Well, 14, if one of the numbers is an 8, the other will be a 6. But look, we already have a 6 in the column. So in fact, that is not possible. Therefore, this number here must be a 5. And that's going to be helpful, because that means this is a 2, and this is a 6. Now, if this is adding to 17, these 2 cells here have to sum to 5. That's either 1 and 4 or 2 and 3. I can't see a way of disambiguating that yet, so I think both are still possible. And these 2 cells here going to have to be 3 and 5. So let's notate that. Which means these 2 are 2 and 9. And these 3 cells now have to be 5, 6 and 7. That means this has to be 6 and 7, because it can't be a 5 because we already have a 5 in the cage. Come back to that in a second. Let's just notate the 5, 6 and 7 in here. So now we've already got 5 and a 1 in this 15 cage, so that's 6 So we know the other two numbers are going to have to sum to 9, so this is going to have to be a 2 or a 3. Irritatingly, both still possible. We can use this 5, 7 now to just give ourselves an extra number down here. Oh my goodness, that's not right, what I meant to do. That's got to be a 5, and this one's got to be the 3. And similarly with this number, it has to be the 2 and that has to be a 9 because of the 8, 9 here. So what numbers are we left with? 1, 4 and 6 to place. So that's helpful actually. This can't be a 1 because then this would have to be a 10 in this cell. This can't be a 6 either because then this would have to be a 5. So in fact this cell here has to be a 4. And this is a 7. And this is a 1 or a 6. Right. To do that. 1, 6, there we go. Okay. Now where should we look for our next number? We can do something with row 7 here because we already have 15 cage. And we can add to that these 3 numbers which sum to 21. 7, the 5 and the 9 there. So we know that all the numbers we've got there add to 36. 21 plus 15 is 36. So we know this cell and this cell, using our 45 rule, must sum up to 9. Now that means this could be an 8 or a 3. And look at that. There's already a 3 in this cage. So in fact, this cell here will have to be an 8, which resolves this as being a 1. This is being a 6. For this is a 1. And now in order to make 19, this will have to be a 7. Which is a nice find. Now I suspect this 9, yes, okay, so now this 15 now has to be 6 and 9 in some order. Let's write that in. Oh dear, software is peculiar. And then this will have to be 4 and 5. Now you can see it, in order for this 9 to be 4 and 5, that can only actually happen in one way, which is if this cell is the 5 and this is the 4, in that order there. Now we've got another interesting thing here. Look at this sort of X-wing pattern of 9s here. We've got a 9 and a 9 here, and a 9 and a 9 here. So in some way, either this will be a 9 and this will be a 9, or this will be a 9 and this will be a 9. But either way, there can be no more 9s in rows 1 and 2. Therefore, we have to think about where we're going to put a 9 in this 3 by 3 block here. It's clearly got to go in one of these 3 cells for the reasons I've just mentioned. But look, it can't go in either of these 2 cells because a 10 cage actually is very restricted in 4 cells. It has to be 1, 2, 3 and 4. It's the only way of making it. So this is going to be a 9 here. And we might as well put some notation into this 10 cage just to help us out. 2, 3, 4. And then we get this nice triple there, interestingly enough, as well, on 2, 3 and 4 in this row. You can see that there. We've got the 2, 3 here and the 2, 3, 4 in these 2 cells. So we've now got, we now know this square here has to be a 6, 7 or an 8. That's the only numbers left, and it can't be a 6 or a 7 because we already have a 6 and a 7 in the column. So this has to be an 8, and this has to be a 6 or a 7. I suspect we can go further than that now. This is a 20 cage. Now we've already got a 2 and an 8 in it, so these are going to be, these 2 cells here have to sum to 10. Now 1 and 9 is possible, 2 and 8 isn't possible, 3 and 7 isn't possible, and 4 and 6 isn't possible. So in fact, this has to be 1 and 9 in some order. Which means so that up here this has to be 2 and 3 in order that we could have actually seen that earlier. And the fact that this 4 here told us that these two cells here could only be 2 and 3, not 1 and 4. That wouldn't have been permissible. That means we can remove the 2 and the 3 from this cage. This can't be a 6 actually, because we already have a 6 in 3 by 3 blocks. That's going to have to be a 7. Therefore this is going to be a 6, and this is going to be a 3. I think we're on the home stretch now. Famous last words, but I'll be surprised if there's too much more to do. And this square here is going to have to be a 1 or a 4. And there's an interesting, again, an interesting X-wing pattern, this time on 2s and 4s. Let me explain what I mean. We've got 2s in these two cells, and 2s in these two cells. Oops, not these two cells. So for the same reason I explained with the 1s, we can't have any more 2s in rows 1 and 2. So there's going to have to be a 2 down here in one of these two cells. That allows us to remove the 2 from here. And similarly, we've got the same thing with 4s. If you look, we've got 4s in these two cells, and we've got 4s in these two cells. So for the same reason, the 4 is going to have to appear down in here as well. So we can remove the 3. So this is 2 and 4. That means this has to be a 3. It's the only place a 3 can go in this cage. And this is going to have to be a 1. And that actually is rather lovely because it now actually resolves the position of the 4s. The way that 10 cage interacted with the X-wings there, lovely. Now that means we've got a 2 and a 3 in this order. And that all looks like it's working quite nicely. This 16 is very restricted now. These two cells have to sum to 7. Therefore, what's possible? Well, 1 and 6 is possible if it's this way round. And 2 and 5 isn't possible, and 3 and 4 isn't possible. So actually 1 and 6 is the only option here. This has to be 1, this has to be 6. Let's go across and make use of that. 6, 9, 8. This therefore has to be 5 and 7 in some order now. Oops. Why isn't it letting me do that? There we go. This has to be 5 and 7. Okay. So let's have a look. Now this 8 cage is forced now. It cannot be a 1, 3, 4 variation. It has to be 1, 2 and 5 because we already have a 3 in the column. You can see that's going to be immediately helpful here in terms of resolving the position of the 2 and the 4. That's going to have to be this way round. I'm staring at this now to see if I can see this now. By simple Sudoku rules, this square here will have to be a 1. And if we look at column 3, we already have a 1, 2, 3, 4 and a 5 in the column, which means we can remove this 5 here. So we're looking to place a 6, 7, 8 and 9. Therefore the only option for this square is a 6 because of the 7, 8 and 9 already appearing in row 7. That means this has to be a 9. This has to be an 8. This has to be a 9. Let's go up to the top there, and this has to be a 7. 7 there like that. We're looking to place 2, 3 and 4 in the open positions in the bottom 3x3 box, this one here. So this has to be a 2 therefore. Not quite resolve the order of the 3 and the 4 annoyingly, so let's just notate them. What are we missing? We're missing a 6 into this square here. It's piddly doing this on a laptop, it takes forever. This will have to be a 2. There we go. So we're looking to place 3, 5 and 8 into these squares. Again, I don't think we can do better than just notate the order at this point. This has got to be a 3 or an 8. That. Let's remove the 5 from this square. A few things we can do to finish this off now. They've got a 28 cage here in 4 cells. Now there's normally 2 options for that. It could be 5, 6, 8 and 9 or 4, 7, 8 and 9. You can see we already have 5 in this 3x3 block, so this has to be in some order 4, 7, 8 and 9. Now if that's the case, the 7s have to go there, the 9s have to go there, the 8s have to go like that, and I can't say anything about the 4s, but we can now use an X-wing on 8s. We've got 8s in these 2 positions and these 2 positions, so we know there are no more 8s in rows 5 or 6. So I can remove the 8s from these 2 positions, and in fact therefore this has to be an 8. That's one way of resolving the question marks there. This 9 is now very restricted. It can't be 1, 8, it can't be 2, 7, it can be 3 and 6 but only in one order, and it can't be 4, 5, so this has to be 3 and 6 like this. I think we'll find that's the final stage in the logic. That's therefore goes that way. One of these 2 cells now has to be a 4, which means this will have to be the 7, this will have to be the 8. Let's go over here, 8, 9 in that order. Go back to this, there's going to be 9 and 4 in that order. This now has to be the 4. This has to be the 6, this has to be the 7. 1, 9 in this order. 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 1. Just the 5 and 7 down here to resolve. So nice puzzle, and not terribly difficult once we use the 45 rule repeatedly, as we recommend, and a few X-wings to sort of resolve some ambiguities along the way. So I hope you got something out of this video. If you did, please subscribe to the channel, we really appreciate it, and we'll see you again for another solve soon on Cracking the Cryptic.